Rudayna, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Antoine. Great to be here.
An MIT graduate, a McGill graduate, you had a great career, and almost 10 years ago to the day, you started Thaki. And my first question to you is if you could just tell us your professional journey from your college days up until the moment you decided to open your company.
Sure, would be happy to. I started off in architecture, actually, with a finishing school, with a love for maths and the arts. So I went into MIT studying architecture. But then I did decided to go for my master's at McGill, and so I had the choice between going back to MIT and continuing my master's in architecture at MIT or trying something new in urban planning at McGill, and I opted for the latter. I was always interested in the social context and the complexity of design, so that led me to study urban planning. And I proceeded to have a 20 plus year career in urban planning in North America, both in Canada and the US. And then in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, actually, I was working in consulting in city hall, in planning, and then also on the planning association side with the nonprofit, the American Planning Association, and then to the Middle East. So my last stint was as an urban planner was in Abu Dhabi, and that was took us to about 2014 at a time when I was soul searching. My career was going great. I had an amazing team. I loved the work that I was doing and everything, but I just felt that there was a void that I probably needed to be doing something else in the latter part, in the second half of my working life. So
Mhm.
I was searching, and a friend told me about this amazing program in Amsterdam, and it's called Think, and sadly the executive program isn't run anymore, but it really helped me tap into what was really important to me, and the program really helped us dig into our passion, purpose, and find out what is really worthwhile to jump into, and gave lots of tools just to make me feel kind of invincible, that anything would be possible. So I felt the courage to take the big plunge and leave. Well, I got the idea during that time, I should say. It's not got the idea. There's a lot that led up to that. It was casting back 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. The news was dominated at the time by the Syrian crisis and the forced displacement. And listening to the news was really hard, seeing how children were missing out on their education entirely. So things were bubbling up, reflection of my own personal narrative. My parents are Palestinian. They were forced out of Palestine in 48 into Lebanon. So I'm Lebanese as well. And then in the 70s, during the Civil War, we fled because of the war and the unsafe situation there. So I ended up growing up in Greece, finishing off my education in Greece before that. So this displacement that's beyond your control, and that leaves you helpless, that leaves parents helpless and unable to do anything. The injustice of it all just really sits very heavily with me. And I was just having a really hard time listening to the news and thinking of what families were going through and the price that kids have to pay. If they lose out on their education, then they've lost the ticket for their futures. So through that and through my urban planning and just personal motivations and ethics of hating waste and not really wanting to waste anything, and thinking of how electronics are not used optimally, whether in the home, whether in the office environment.
Yeah.
We discard perfectly good technology, whether they're phones, whether they're laptops, whether they're TVs. They're discarded and trashed mostly when they still have um, a long shelf life remaining, because we want the latest models, higher performance, what have you. So that was really weighing on me, and seeing how my children were younger at the time, how they were learning in a very different way to how I learned when I was in school. And it had a lot to do with the technology for good. There's a lot of technology
Yep.
for ill. But I was looking at this point at how if they weren't engaging, if kids weren't engaging in technology, they're being left behind too. So I wanted to see how we can leverage technology in a in a circular way and using circular economy before even the term was hip back then.
Yeah.
Taking
Mm,
taking what's not needed from businesses, in this case, their old laptops, and then getting them as education tools for for the children. So that was the genesis of the idea, which at first was really simple, old laptops, get them to kids.
mhm,
Easy. So that's the not sounds easy, but there is a lot of complexity behind it, and then
mhm.
also the business has grown in different ways.
And I'm going to get back to this, but there's just so much to unpack here. You've had the least we can say, a very exciting life. And I want to first start with the university side. So McGill, MIT, people dream about going to these universities. They're considered the top universities in the world. How do you think they affected you with the person you are today? And do you think that back then people understood about the turbulence in the Middle East the same way people understand it today?
Well, today, where we are today, 2025, is if people don't understand the Middle East and have taken a close look, then they really are blind so much because we have been in the news. We've been dominating the news since 1990, but the way social media has brought the Middle East, Palestine, Gaza, to the public, if they're just being biased and blind, if they really don't know what's going on. So back then I was in the late 80s and coming in as Lebanese, so always in the US. It's always interesting. And it was also, we were approaching the end of the apartheid era in South Africa. So that was a big moment as well, which very much feels like it's being mirrored today, and lots of things that are unresolved. There were student protests back then. They didn't feel as violent and as unjust as they feel now, I have to say. I think it just feels like the world is just feels very, it felt more hopeful
Mhm.
back then than it does now. I'm sorry. I'm not sitting in a very hopeful spot in time right now,
Mhm.
despite I may be smiling, but I think it definitely, I think we felt much more hopeful back then. And, Berlin and just things, it was a time of turmoil, but a time of hope. Um, and there seemed to be a law, rule of law, and somehow that, or maybe my hindsight is being rosier than it should be. But I think I had more hope for my future then than I do for my kids' futures today.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but issues prevail. I think we are encountering similar issues, and things are certainly not resolved. And if they're not resolved, they fester and they become bigger and bigger. And
Mhm.
technology, I mentioned technology for good, but we've also seen a remarkable escalation of technology for ill. It's so terrifying seeing how much harm and destruction technology is doing today. I guess the yin and the yang of everything.
Yeah. And at what point did you decide that I'm going to spend my entire life for this cause and for this issue? I mean, it's so personal to you, but you
Yeah,
really left everything behind. You had a great career,
yeah.
you were doing great, you have a family. So what made you start this? What was the final push? What is that thing that said, I want to stop everything, all these financial aspirations and focus on something that is so close to my heart?
Yeah. I mean, I was in my 40s, so my career had already taken off. I had a great job. I was paid well. So I was at a time, I'm not in my 20s startup and I'm going to throw everything. I had some backing, I had some foundation, I had some
Yeah.
savings. So I didn't feel like I was taking all of the risks that I would be if I was starting an early career, maybe. But honestly, once I got the idea and I started delving into it, the inner compass in me, there was no way I was going to do anything else. So it was that very, very strong
Yes.
intuition, very strong sense of purpose. And the first year, I still, I told my colleagues, my old boss, that I want to step away. They convinced me to stay on for another year, and I was somewhat part-time, not really, but somewhat part-time. But by the end of it, I had to do this. I had to do Dhaki full time. And it was just it was all consuming, whether, I'm swimming, whether I'm sleeping, whether I'm running, whatever it is that I'm doing. It was just thinking through all of the details. And it's, hu- there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work involved, especially in the startup years when you're on your own. And I didn't want to spend a penny. The only money I spent was on my plane tickets to go to Lebanon at the time. And
Mm,
that's it. And I think I paid for one shipment, and it was a small shipment, but I really wanted to see how I could do this, truly leveraging partnerships, truly leveraging open source. So I thought I had a big network as an urban planner, having worked in the Middle East and in North America. And then when I started Dheki, like, whoa, it has really
mm,
expanded. And I think it was at a time when people were feeling the frustration of what was happening in Syria. They didn't it wasn't a question of donations, money. And I wasn't asking for financial support. I was asking businesses, give me your old laptops. And that was an easy ask because it was a liability for them. Either they have storage rooms that they needed to get rid of, they needed to cycle out, and I was helping solve a problem for them.
mhm,
So that was one component, a foundational component, hardware. And then we got into logistics because we were moving them from the UAE to Lebanon at the time, mostly. And I learned quickly that logistics is not easy. So software is super easy, right? You do software, you download an app and off you go. But when you've got that and you've got to move things and you've got to deal with border issues, it's not easy. But we managed to find the right partnerships and the right means. And so everything was starting from zero because I knew I was stepping into technology space because Dheki is a tech enterprise ultimately. And I can talk more about the various techs that we do.
mhm,
There's hardware involved, there's logistics. And then we also got initially, I wanted to, assuming that we can have internet connectivity and I quickly learned because I started then making frequent trips to Lebanon to understand what the situation was on the ground. I had concept, but is it validated? Does it make sense? Will it fit? And everything was being validated indeed. And it was just so eye-opening to be doing that scoping and that landscape understanding and to see who the players are. And funny enough, from the outside, I come in and connect people locally who
mm.
really should be talking to each other and know what they're doing.
It sounds like there are so many moving parts. So looking back at 10 years ago, what was the most challenging part of starting the project? Was it the vision? Was it finding the right partners? What was it? What was so difficult that you had to overcome?
The very beginning, there have been different challenges along the way, and some of them come back. So at the very first, I thought, okay, getting laptops. So my first
Mm,
pitch was to my kids' school, to the superintendent, and they had just given a bunch of laptops to e-waste. But they said, but we love what you're doing. And the IT director said, love what you're doing, and we'll hold on to laptops in the future. And can I help you? Can I join your team? I said, yes, please, because I know what I wanted to do. I've got the idea, the vision, but I have no idea how to do it because I'm not a techie. I didn't even know what Linux was. I knew nothing back then. And since then, I've become a huge, huge fan of open source technologies, which is where we stand. So the initial challenge managed to get laptops, also pitched PwC, and their managing director said, yeah, sure. Well, it took a chance on me. Not yeah, sure, but it was a massive business decision that they made,
yeah.
and uh, took a chance to made it. It was a risky decision, but they did it, and they still are amazing partners till today. And that was a massive win for me. So what I thought would be a challenge initially wasn't a challenge. Now it is, by the way, back to being a challenge. I can talk more about that later. So
Hmm.
then the next big challenge was, okay, so no internet or really weak internet that is more disruptive if you get cut out for the learner. Then it's best not to have internet. So how are they going to access all of the educational resources that I was hoping that they would get? So that quickly moved, let's find this curate content and load the laptops with content. So that then we stepped into the space of, okay, who is doing the best things? And 10 years ago, by the way, EdTech content, education content in Arabic was really sparse. There were very few players at the time. I'm very happy to say that it's become a great, rich, competitive market now in what's available in digital learning for children. But there wasn't much back then. So that was then, reaching out to the network, going to a big conference, EdTech conference, and just tapping the network and being introduced or finding. At this point, we have 150 gigs of offline content. So we have a lot of partnerships with EdTech companies that give us the rights to use their content that they otherwise have licensed and on prescription model or for fee, but they give us the rights to use it. And we also have a bunch of open source
Mm.
technologies that are on the laptops. It's all engaging, it's gamified, it's drag and drop. So it really emulates a rich learning and engaging. It's just really motivating for kids to engage with the material.
Mm. I'm just really seeing this theme of getting things done. First, you didn't have any laptops. You used your kids' schools to get started. So it was very personal. And then
Mhm.
you were able to expand to corporations like PwC. You mentioned that. So now that you have the laptop, no connectivity. What do I do
Mhm.
then? You had to find a way to make this work without an internet connection, and you did. You might even have been one of the people who kicked off the competitiveness in the Arabic language educational uh, maybe because it's you're right. I mean, even today we do have some companies that do it in Arabic, but most of the tech is still in English and in Western languages.
Yeah.
So I really admire your relentlessness to get things done. And uh,
Yeah, I can be stubborn. And so
yeah,
one of the first challenge was, okay, we've got all of this content and we're
yeah,
throwing it on the desktop. And that's where, it has to be properly designed. So I think it was 2017, I got my first grant, $30,000, and hired a team from RBK. They were at the time doing coding startup, but they were starting a consulting arm. So with that fund, we built our first interface. And now we just recently rebuilt the second interface. And the leader, the tech leader, then is now our tech leader. So he's our amazing and extremely talented tech lead. So we built a platform that's the DECI app, we call it. So when you get the laptops, you launch this app and everything is bilingual. It's organized beautifully. It's categorized. It's got gives in descriptions and languages and grade levels. So I'm really happy with that. So that the user, it's a beautiful user experience. So I think probably my architecture design background has that stayed with me and being just really annoying and picky on
mm.
details that can drive some people crazy sometimes. But attention to design and how things look to me really matter. So I think that's something that's carried over from my background.
And how is the reception? I mean, we're talking about kids here.
Yeah.
First of all, what's the age range?
Really, K through 12 and beyond. So it's all age ranges. The content that we have on the education side is heavier on the elementary school age children, but there is content that goes beyond. And I should mention also the reason why we focus on laptops from the beginning is we get them from businesses. They have the capacity to hold gigs and gigs of content because we're holding things. It's fully portable, so you don't have to connect to a server. If the laptop moves with you and all of the learning material moves with you, and there's a keyboard, beyond a phone or a tablet. Keyboard digital literacy to me is critical. So it's not just a question of accessing the learning content, but being able to manipulate spreadsheets, know how to do word processing, presentations, coding. All of these things require, the larger screen of the laptop and a keyboard. So we focus on these skills as well and try to bring resources towards those that are needed from, throughout. So our hope is that we have some university students also that get laptops. It's a smaller share of recipients, but we just think of how you use laptops. Think how you use them at universities when you were a kid. Well, I didn't. Yeah, you probably use laptops in kids. I didn't. They weren't around when I was a kid. But we want to just not, we want the kids that we work with to have the experience that kids in private schools and fully well-functioning school systems have the same experience, have the same opportunities. This is the point, is to give the kids the same opportunities in a self-guided, motivating way that they can take agency and ownership of their learning journeys. Because many of those kids are going to be in and out of schools. But if we can instill the love of learning, the curiosity to dig deeper and to get away from rote learning, which is often the learning environment that they're in, then I think they have a much better chance of succeeding in education in general, in business, in future business, in creating their own opportunities and finding systems because the the world isn't looking out for them. And so we want to equip them to be able to tap into resources and leverage as much as they can.
And
By
how do you measure the impact of like, do you try to test it out for a few months and see what kids know after a year of using the soft? Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, we do, I guess, mixed methodology. So we both do both qualitative and quantitative. And I have to say, yes, we do the qualitative. We do annual surveys generally across the board. So the school leaders who are our primary points of contact, the teachers and the students, we survey them. And now we've moved to purpose of sampling before we were trying to, because we've grown so much now where we have we're approaching 200 schools and learning centers. And we've reached probably over 41,000 children. But I only this year with a small age group, we've engaged with 10,500 children. So it's probably about 15,000 children a year that work on DECI. Um, and we've moved to purposive sampling in the qualitative where we can't ask we don't ask them to follow a curriculum. So we ask for questions probing on motivation, attitudes towards learning, interest, engagement. Is it impacting children with learning difficulties? So these are the kinds of questions that we ask, and definitely extremely strong results. We get very strong feedback on the positive side. And really, I think for me, probably more insightful is the qualitative stuff, the interviews that we have, the observations, field observations that I and my team have. And the conversations, these are the most instructive because, yes, it's great to have all of these data, but honestly, the innovation comes from the outliers, I've realized. So it could be an observation, and I don't get to go to the Middle East as often now, but which I'm, unfortunately, it is what it is. I can't. But whenever I go and I realize that even though I'm not there to observe the daily, because I come in intermittently, I can see things that I probably will not be able to see seeing them on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes an experience or an observation that can trigger like, whoa, okay, let's pay attention to this. And then that often leads to the innovations that we've built into our model and the changes that we do.
And you factor in the fact that it is not a normal environment for these kids. A lot of them, they might be in very difficult situations. And even kids that are very comfortable, if you put them in the same area that these kids are living in, they might not have the willingness to learn. So they might have a different mindset. So do you factor this as well?
Oh, absolutely. And trauma is huge. Within the communities at work, trauma is a massive influencing factor, and that influences everything. It influences things. For example, we were early on, I was going to one of our schools, our school partners, and they had a group of ophthalmologists doing exams of all of the eye exams for all the kids. And I was speaking to the examining physician, and he says, I've never seen such poor eyesight and such horrendous eye conditions of children. And that could be related to malnutrition, to trauma, and young kids, I have five, degree 5 degree lenses. I mean, he just was just flabbergasted, blown away by that. So trauma can impact so much. And there's the primary trauma that the kids, if they were in a situation of war or a situation of displacement, they themselves have experienced the primary trauma, or they're experiencing the primary trauma of their parents, or the secondary trauma of their parents, and then there's a generational trauma on top of that. So all of these things, and science has shown that trauma stays in our cells and stays in our DNA. So my grandparents' trauma is still in me and in you. So yes, the kids have so much to deal with, and often the classrooms are overcrowded as well because of the situation. So it's absolutely suboptimal conditions or environments. But we've seen and we keep on hearing that actually the laptops are like a reward for the kids. And it's an opportunity also for the teacher to maybe have some of the students on computers and give more attention to the other half of the students. So these kinds of interventions and how the teacher, we work very closely with the teachers as well. And we developed a teacher training platform for them, which is now we've published as an app. It's actually anybody can download it. It's bilingual in Arabic and English. But this came out of, again, my stubbornness, seeing that the teachers needed training, and doing live training. This was before COVID, was just without beyond reach. It was just too expensive and not feasible, especially at the time we had maybe 20, 30 schools, and now we've got almost 200 schools that we need to reach. So that I just stubbornly kept on thinking, how can we develop something that's digital, that reaches them? And pre-COVID, lots of naysayers says, no, it's got to be hands-on, hands-on. Well, COVID came, we got a grant to develop it, and we worked with teachers, and now we've got a platform that helps teachers in how to navigate this environment. So working with the teachers has been an important part for us because they need to be supported in applying digital, because it can help them tremendously. And they love the content that we curate. So we put a lot of attention into the partnerships that we have with the learning material, sometimes things that they need, and oftentimes they wouldn't even know of these things, whether it's things related to mental health and well-being, or entrepreneurship, things like that they wouldn't ask for. It's not part of their curriculum. Once they receive them, they just love having these resources.
And where do you find these teachers? Are they part of your organization or are they volunteers? You talked
Oh,
about the teachers.
they're the teachers running the schools. So we
You're
empower
empowering them. Okay.
this. We are equipping the schools with the hardware, and then that's not enough. So we've got the content, and then we've got the training, and we keep in touch with them. So it's not just here you go and away we go. We keep in close contact to continue mentoring, to give support, and most importantly for us to get the feedback, because we don't just we want to be able to what we're doing to be working for them.
And to put this in context for the viewers, so these schools and teachers that you worked with, the first time you met with them, what was the situation before giving them the equipment? What did they have? Did they have something at hand? Like, can you
Technology,
explain?
no, no technology,
Nothing at all?
no. I mean, the teachers had mobile phones, but but they weren't using them for learning, for teaching.
Okay. And maybe I want to ask one last thing about when we talked about malnutrition and how this could affect the mindset of the students. Does that mean you're partnering up or you're trying to partner up with other organization to, for example, you would handle the educational aspect, they would handle food, like trying to bring both of them together to schools? Do you have these kinds of partnerships, or are you just focused on the education part?
We ourselves are focused on education, and the school leaders are incredible, I have to say. And there's a lot of NGO schools, non-formal schools that have emerged on the scene. They're the ones who find who take care of these other needs. And a lot of these incredible schools, yes, they provide the meals for the children, because that could be the only meals that the children are getting. So a breakfast is very it's quite common for that to happen. Yeah, but no, this is not something that we've stepped into ourselves.
Okay, since we're going to wrap up in a few minutes, for the viewers and the people that are listening, how can they support the organization?
Thank you. Well, if you're a business or a business owner or have access to a network of decision makers in large corporations, please tap them into donating their used laptops to us. And of course, always funding, but really the hardware technology is critical for us. And yeah, just follow us because we're always up to new things and doing, we've stepped into social emotional learning now as well. And we're in the region. We operate in Lebanon, Jordan, starting in Egypt now as well. And, hopefully we'll expand in the region, but we're staying focused on the Arabic speaking learner.
And is it just laptops or is it equipment that comes with it? And we're talking keyboards, mouse, everything else.
They could be. A mice could be fine, and keyboards are sometimes helpful, but mostly we don't get desktops because they're too difficult and too bulky, and maneuvering is too difficult, and they also don't have the power supply because we also deal in areas where there's power interruptions. Tablets could be great, and maybe phones. We haven't gotten into that yet, but
Mm.
if we can get them in, or if they're in within these countries, and we can definitely make use of phones. And logistics bulk. Whenever we're shipping things, things have to be in bulk. So if we can do consolidation, otherwise, 10, 20 laptops in different places are difficult for us because
Yeah.
then you have to spend a fortune getting them, and then there's clearance. It's just too difficult. So that's why we want to hit corporations and ideally the big corporations. If people go to our website, you can see a lot of the donors that we have, and I also have realized that I don't always take no for an answer, and somebody else within a company may have a different may have a different response. So even if you're talking to a partner in a large corporation, then a couple of years later, I may meet another partner from the same corporation who may move things. Because usually it takes a champion from within the company to move things around and make it happen, whether it's to the CSR department or IT ultimately has to be involved. These are two typical departments that are engaged in the decision making, or the MD or CO, whomever.
Ben, thank you so much for your time. This is what you're doing is so inspiring. And anyone listening, if you can help, it is one of the greatest causes that exist, helping children get educated. Thank you so much, Rudayna, for your time.
Thank you so much, Antoine. Great to be here.